This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
Hello and welcome to Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations, the show that aims to elevate the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today we welcome Antonio Tiergarten. Antonio is a friend and fellow former Budtender who is now the Regional Sales Manager for Western Canada for Rubicon Organics. Rubicon is a licensed producer of cannabis, incorporating brands like 1964 Supply Co., Wildflower, and one of my absolute favourites, Simply Bare Organic. Hailing from Brazil, it was Antonio's experience at a legacy cannabis dispensary in Toronto prior to federal legalisation that sparked an interest in cannabis and inspired his passionate pursuit of knowledge. If you enjoy what you hear on today's show, please make sure you follow on Instagram at @GiveAndToke and also give a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Antonio Tiergarten. Welcome to the show, Antonio Tiergarten.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
It's really nice to have you here, man. You know, we go back a little while. We have some shared experiences together, which we'll dive deep into. But, you know, I've enjoyed dipping bread in cannabis-infused oil at dinner with you. We've shared some special infused joints and even a few regular joints too. I know you're always up for experimenting, but what is your absolute favorite way to consume cannabis? You know, what's your ritual?
That's a good question. Has been evolving along the years, as I get more into cannabis and more experiences and all that. I think right now, rosin is my go-to. It's so clean, so light-headed. You don't get foggy high from what you get from a big joint or a bong, and you get so much flavor out of it as well. And it's still all solventless, so it's a more also natural way of extracting. So that's what I'm digging at the moment.
Rosin was definitely one of my first kind of oh my God experiences with cannabis in Canada, where I was working in a liquor store at the time and a customer came in, was telling me all about it. I had no idea what it was. And he actually invited me back to his place to make some with him. So for those that don't know what rosin is that solventless, pure extract from the cannabis plant where heat and pressure are applied to cannabis flower to bring out this beautiful, pure extract. And I agree, man, it's such a clean, delightful way. You know, some people might be familiar with it in dab form. Sometimes shatter is used for that, which is a different extraction. But yeah, rosin is fantastic, and it's something we're still yet to see a lot of on the market here. But as we steadily progress, I'm sure that's something that we'll be enthusiastic about as well. Now, as I said, you and I have some parallels in our early days in Canada. We both worked at the same liquor store. We both worked at the same cannabis company. We were both budtenders at Muse. Tell us how you came to be working in Vancouver as a budtender, because I understand it was a visit to a dispensary in Toronto that really sparked your interest in cannabis.
Yeah, so I came from Brazil. I used to work for Whirlpool, the appliances manufacturer in Brazil. I'm an engineer as well, so I started working with them as an engineer, transitioned to the new business area. And then on that area, I was working with different startups and different business units from Whirlpool in different countries. And that's how I came to Canada for work. That was February 2018, so about 8 months before legalization. And I wasn't aware of what was happening here. I wasn't following what was happening in Canada, how big was the culture here already. Then was driving downtown Toronto, saw this store of a big cannabis leaf, and got curious, right? And I was alone. Came back, entered the shop. Was that black dark room with just a clerk in the corner. I went to him. Okay, what's this? How it works? We are a medical cannabis dispensary. If you want, you can make your registration. Just need your documentation, and then you can go inside and buy whatever you want. I said, okay, that's awesome. I didn't know it was legal. No, it's not. So I had that experience and really kind of opened my mind to what was happening here. I already had the dream of living abroad. I lived in Berlin 10 years ago for a while, went back to Brazil and had this dream of someday going North America, Europe, and that really matched well with my plans, and that's how I ended up in Vancouver. Then in Vancouver, I came here to live a few months before COVID happened. So my initial goal was to use my sales experience, my business experience, and land sales representative job. And I was getting there. Then COVID happened, everything stopped. The companies I was talking to didn't have a job offering anymore. So I went to my plan B. I actually came to Vancouver the year before, 2019, to get to know the city. Was actually around 420. And I came here to celebrate and did a cannabis sommelier course with CannaReps. So I knew that if I needed, I had a certification to work in a store. And during COVID, cannabis was an essential business, so the stores didn't close. I got to know Muse, in the store that you work at, and really like it, the design, the products, and the people. So I took a chance to work. They were opening a new location in downtown Vancouver, hired me. So it was a great start to my cannabis career in Canada.
It's interesting because you mentioned that, your first experience was not a legal one. And that's kind of the funny thing about Canada. Like, I came to Canada when legalization had been implemented, but my first experiences were still with, legacy stores. Some people would call them black market, gray market. Legacy is the better name for them because they were there first. And that kind of speaks to that long-standing cannabis culture in Canada. More so on the West Coast, but even over in Toronto before legalization, there were still these stores around. How did it feel to come from somewhere where it was so illegal and stigmatized to come to Canada where even prior to legalization, there was access to it?
It was incredible. I think that was the ultimate difference or feeling that made me want to come and live here. Like when I came to Vancouver that I mentioned on 420, that was leisure travel. I was actually working in Chicago at the time and had a week vacation to take. So I came to Vancouver, spent a week, did the course, spent 420. And it's so amazing to, see 100,000 people at Sunset Beach smoking freely. Incredible, and even at that moment, I shopped in a few stores, and later on I discovered they were legacy stores. I thought they were legal. I thought I was buying in legal places because it was hard to, as
it's Canada,
very difficult to understand, but incredible experience, and that's what really made me have the final decision. And I came back to Brazil, quit my job, sold my apartment, took my savings and took my wife, and we both came. She was very willing to come as well.
I think both of you and I, again, have those parallels of very supportive partners who have supported this passion and this pursuit because, I think it can be pretty easy to be, a bearded guy that loves weed that's kind of, oh yeah, that guy's just getting stoned all the time. But here we are actually in functional relationships being supported. So we're both very grateful for the amazing women in our lives for that reason. Now, what had been your personal relationship with cannabis prior to moving to Canada?
I started smoking like in my youth, probably at 17, right before I went to college, maybe 16, 17. Just like at parties with friends, like was something similar to alcohol at the time, like connect to partying. And in the beginning, that's what it was for me. I didn't really overindulge. I am from part in Brazil, in the south of Brazil, that it's very heavily indexed in alcohol. Like people tend to drink a lot of alcohol, and I was going that path as well. And then when I went to college and started drinking even more alcohol and got to know cannabis better, after I started realizing the differences, I started consuming more cannabis and drinking less alcohol. And nowadays, like I still like my craft beers, my whiskey, but it's like very minimal, and I consume cannabis daily, probably multiple times a day, and it feels much better, like for my health and like my mind.
That is a recurring theme that comes up in this show. First of all, how much alcohol we tend to drink in our youth and our teens and our young adulthood, and then that discovery that perhaps cannabis is a little more functional. And it doesn't often add up with the images we see in movies of people being stoners and high and dumb. But so often as I have these conversations with people, people are using cannabis to reinstate a sense of balance. And you know what? It's okay to be completely high as well. Like, I'm not judging that because it's something that I've enjoyed doing too. But far more often than not, I'm just looking to create a sense of balance and a sense of kind of ease in my day so I can go and tackle the day. So often alcohol is an escape, whereas I feel that cannabis is almost an entrance to life. So it's funny because that keeps coming up in different forms. Just, my God, how much alcohol did I drink as a young person, and how much better does cannabis suit me? But generally speaking, a lot of people aren't willing to take that dive because it takes some experimentation. You know, you might have a bad edible or a bad joint or something like that, and people are like, oh no, cannabis doesn't work for me. Yet you'll have 45 nights where you wake up the next morning feeling hungover and the day's a write-off and you don't think twice. So it's a common thread, and it's something that I think really became noticeable for people in COVID as well. You know, you mentioned becoming a budtender during COVID, which was a really difficult time to work in retail. But I also got to notice that 2020, I was in lockdown with cannabis. 2021, I was back in Australia and I didn't have access to legal cannabis. And I can tell you very easily which one suited me best. So what was it that you noticed about why cannabis worked better for you, in a social setting than alcohol did?
On the later part of my college, I started realizing how that really helped me, like being more calm, more relaxed. I'm a very anxious person by nature, like my normal self. I'm always worrying about things and want to do things at the same moment, like I can't wait. Cannabis really brings me to a more relaxed and more understanding mentality, even with other people, like being more empathetic and all of that. So that's how I really increased my consumption and started studying cannabis, and then later on connected with everything that happened in Canada that I mentioned before.
Let's talk a little bit about your transition from being a budtender to Rubicon Organics. So as I mentioned, COVID wasn't a great time to be a budtender. I had a great time in 2019 when we could really give that retail experience. But by 2020, we're behind plexiglass. People that are coming to the store are getting more money from government payouts than we are to work there. So tell us about your transition from budtender to Rubicon Organics.
One of the things for me when I started working as a budtender that really impressed me was the customers that you see in the store. Like, it's every type of person. Like, there's no stereotype like you expect maybe would be, but no, like I remember serving youth, elderly people, middle-aged people, rich people, poor people, working class, doctors, CEOs, you name it, and you see how that's really can be very beneficial to a whole lot of different types of people. Then going from there to a sales position was also a very interesting transition. So from Muse, I took a job for a sales agency based out of the East Coast called Worldwide Brands. And I was their territory manager for British Columbia, starting the market here. They didn't have a presence or brands here before. So it was a very interesting moment for me. I was able to travel to the province, get to know a lot of different stores, and then to also realize the difference between stores. That's also huge. You have your boutique, you have your value stores, craft connoisseurs, knowledgeable budtenders like yourself, that really digs into the product and can really help the customer that is walking to the door. And then you have a whole lot of other stores and budtenders that are just order takers. And then if it's someone new coming to shop for the first time, it can be very confusing and overwhelming for them. And yeah, so with that experience as a sales rep, I was able to use all of that experience as a budtender, knowing what consumers are looking for, what they ask for to budtenders, what they come back and want to buy again, what they don't want to buy again. And that really helped me then in the sales side, selling to the stores, telling them about the products. So it was a great foundation, I think, for my cannabis career being a budtender.
Definitely. So you're regional sales manager for Western Canada for Rubicon Organics. What does that involve?
So I overlook the Western provinces in each province in some capacity. So we have two big provinces, BC and Alberta, that are two of the biggest markets in Canada. And then we have the smaller provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Yukon, Northwestern Territories. So that's the territory that I look after now. We have a structure where we have a director that it's my boss. He works with the big provinces in terms of what we offer and which products go to that province and do the whole relationship with the province. And then field sales, we have a team in BC, in Alberta, that goes to the stores, does the job that I was mentioning I was doing for Worldwide Brands before, telling about the products, what's new, educating them about everything that we do. So what I do, I help that team on how to interact with the stores, how to do more, achieve the goals that they have. And I work with the smaller provinces to get our product to Yukon, to Northwestern Territories, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and give them a good service as well.
It's been a little while since I've had someone on the show that works kind of with brands and in sales. And I think sometimes this can kind of scare people off cannabis a little bit, this idea that there are brands out there and there are sales managers. But the reason that this is important, particularly for cannabis and for people to understand, is this isn't just like any other commodity or any other product. This needs to have people like you because, for example, cannabis is federally legal in Canada, but every province and then even different municipalities within those have different rules and regulations. So it's actually really important to have people like you understanding what each province can do and what they can deliver because their laws and rules and regulations are different. So what are some of the differences that you would see province to province?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the big challenges that we face in the industry, having so much difference from province to province. And that's across the whole country. We have a province like Quebec, for example, that they only have government stores. They don't have private stores. So that's the first big difference from BC or Alberta, Ontario. So you have to work with that government body, and they have to give you access to reach the store. You can go to the store and sell to the store. They also have a rule of Quebec producers. So I think it's 90% or above 85% of the products, the brands in Quebec have to be grown locally. So very few brands outside of Quebec are actually there. We are one of the only LPs outside of Quebec that have brands in Quebec.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. In Manitoba used to have, since legalization, they had a social responsibility fee. That was a fee that every retailer had to pay 6% of their total revenue.
Whoa.
Yeah, per year. So every single store or chain had to pay 6% of their revenue to the government for a social responsibility fee that was supposed to educate, help create safe spaces to consume, whatever. It didn't happen.
That's the government as well that aren't allowing homegrown, yet they're collecting 6% of people's revenue because they're going to educate people. That's really frustrating and upsetting.
100%, especially because you already have that from Health Canada, so they were adding an extra fee. But what is actually good news that a lot of retailers from Manitoba came together and they went and protested the government and show and asked actually, why is this money? What are you doing with this money? And the government didn't have what to say. So they got that revoked. And now that fee no longer exists. So it's a huge win for the retailers in Manitoba. That was maybe 2 months ago. Then you go to Yukon or Northwestern Territories that are much smaller provinces. They have 3-4 stores in each province. So it's, you almost sell directly to the store, small population. So it's a very different market and different way to operate.
It requires a lot of creativity and it requires brands to be really good because, this is nearly 5 years into legalization. Brands are coming and going. Licensed producers are coming and going. Companies are hemorrhaging cash. Others are doing really well. So I want to talk about Rubicon now because this is a brand that I really like and it's a brand that I really miss, particularly Simply Bare Organic. So within Rubicon's portfolio, there's 1964 Supply Co., Homestead Cannabis Supply, Wildflower, Lab Theory, and obviously my favorite, Simply Bare Organic. Can you explain to those, particularly for those who maybe haven't experienced cannabis retail, why an array of brands within a producer is so important. You know, some people just think, oh, weed is weed. But within the Rubicon portfolio, these are all distinctly different brands offering different types of products. So talk to us a little bit about each of those.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting that you mentioned the difference, like weed is weed and having like different brands and different offerings. Rubicon started only with Simply Bare in Canada, maybe 3 years ago, a little bit more than that. I remember actually when I started at Muse, my first days, another Budtender came to me and said, this is the holy grail, this is the best thing in the market, and was Simply Bare Blue Dream. And my favorite was Simply Bare Creek Congo. So I had a really good interest, in working for the company at some point. But anyway, coming back to the point, we had Simply Bare in markets, and the idea of Simply Bare is really premium, high quality, organic cannabis, no compromises, and that's what we are able to deliver. But I think the market is not there yet in scale for that, to pay the extra price, because the industry is very hard, as you were mentioning, from a brand perspective, to how you market your product, like how you tell a story to your consumer when you can't do pretty much anything, even in a label. There's a lot of information that you are obliged to put there, and then there's very few space left to to say anything else. So we had Simply Bare, and we had more biomass and more products that we could create. So the company had the strategy of creating a portfolio of brands and bringing different offerings to different consumers in different price tiers. So now, thinking about our three main brands, flower, pre-rolls, Simply Bare is our premium, what's new, exciting genetics from California, from Europe, whatever is really new and hot. 1964 is our classic, known and true. We have Comatose in market right now, for example. It's amazing. It sells out everywhere in Canada. And then Homestead is our value brand. So we don't grow thinking about Homestead. But if you have extra biomass, or sometimes if you have a trial of a new genetic that we are maybe bringing to Simply Bare, but we didn't like how it's ended up being, okay, that's a Homestead offering. So it's kind of a good, better, best strategy with the three brands, and really works really well, because then you can access different price points and different consumers. And that really showed in Rubicon sales in the last years are just growing every quarter. We are in a really good trajectory. So those are the three brands of flower, pre-rolls, concentrates, and then Lab Theory, that it's a concentrate brand, a solvent-based concentrate. We have now diamonds in market, so pure THC diamonds with terpene salts from our organic flower, and then Wildflower, topical, a wellness brand. That's actually a international brand. It's not fully owned by Rubicon. We own the brand in Canada as of the end of last year. We used to have an agreement with them to produce and distribute the products, and then now we actually bought the brand. So we are bringing new products to the market. They're actually about to launch in the next few weeks, looking into more offerings for the next year too.
And when you talk health and wellness with cannabis, like those are CBD roll-ons and things like that, right? Like this is a section of the market we don't have yet here, but something that I think will fascinate people once we do.
100%. So the wellness market is just growing around the world, and CBD is a huge component of that, or a really important ingredient that you can use in several different ways, and it's a much easier ingredient to have internationally as well. That's why Wildflower, for example, is already an international brand. They can have products in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, I think even in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, or New Zealand.
We're getting there. So CBD is now legal for over-the-counter purchase, but no companies have been approved to make it for over-the-counter purchase. So we're in this dumb gray area, and will still be for another couple of years. So
we have CBD topical in markets right now. It's CBD only. We are bringing a THC and CBD topical to market, a balanced option, and an extra strength, the same idea, CBD topical. And then in the future, we look at other options like capsules and other wellness products using minor cannabinoids like CBN, CBG, a lot of things that are now getting more attention and getting more scientific research as well. So I think there's so much to happen in the next few years. That's for me what really excites me more about the whole industry is how much there's still to be done, you know?
Yeah, very much so. Like, it's exciting to look at where it's going to be in, 10, 20, 30 years. We are going to look back on some of the things that were done now as mistakes and, laugh at what we didn't know. But this work has to be done in these early stages. And that's really, really exciting. So I want to talk a little bit about Simply Bare some more, because while I was in Canada, I got to enjoy some absolutely superb cannabis flower from Simply Bare. You mentioned that Blue Dream, miles ahead of any other on the market. Sour Cookies is one of the few sativas that I can actually handle. And Apple Toffee was a borderline religious experience. And there was a very good reason that was purposely the last thing I smoked in Canada before I got on my flight home. So what are Simply Bare up to at the moment? It's been 2.5 years since I've had the pleasure of smoking that incredibly grown organic cannabis flower. What's on the cards right now?
So we have a strategy in place where we're bringing new cultivars every quarter. So keeping it fresh and exciting. Realize that especially in these moments, the premium, the craft consumer usually wants something different. Not to say they won't buy again or there's no consumers that buy every time the same thing, but usually, even talking about myself, like I look on how I shop and that's what I do. I like to try something new, right? So we are bringing a cultivar. It stays in market for usually about 2 or 3 months in the 3.5 grams, and then goes to the bigger bags, 14, 28 grams. So whoever really liked that strain have the option of buying in bulk and then bring something new in the 3.5. We started at end of last year. So far, it's going really well. So right now, what we have in market is the two that just launched is Jelly Breath and Scotty Biscotti. Jelly Breath is more like fruity and funky, beautiful colors in the buds. Scotty Biscotti is really your like classic OG, gassy, some sweet undertones as well, but very strong in the gas. Before that, we had White Rainbow and Cleopatra. White Rainbow was probably my favorite one in market right now. It's like fruity and sweet and gassy. It's just like a beautiful, complex aroma and flavor. So many cultivars, and that's what it's being really interesting, because there's always something new, and we are always on the hunt for genetics as well. It's part of our also strategy as a company. Look for more genetics and look for what we want to bring to market. So we have a plan for what's coming in the next months already. We are not looking for the next quarter. We are looking for next year, but we are always trying 10, 20 new genetics in the greenhouse, small runs to see how they do and if it makes sense if they also match to the way we grow organically in a greenhouse. It's not easy. It's not any genetic that can thrive in that environment. So it's very important for us to make those trials and decide which genetics to bring. For you to have an idea, we actually tried, I think, almost 200 genetics so far since the start, and we brought to market maybe 30, 40 maximum. So we have an idea of how many don't make the cut.
That's really cool to know. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people get accustomed to cannabis producers just pumping out everything they've got. They make something, so they sell it. And to an extent, you alluded to that. You developed brands within Rubicon to manage excess biomass and things that have been grown too much, but not because they're bad quality, just because they weren't able to be distributed in the original way. And that's what I really like about Simply Bare, and that's that distinction. It's that commitment to research and development. It's not just putting out everything because we've grown it and because we could make money from it. It's a commitment to quality. And a big part of that quality is the organic factor. So talk to us about why Simply Bare's approach is so important. What is organic cannabis? What are you guys doing that makes it organic? What are you not doing? And why is this so important?
So to grow organic cannabis is very similar to any other organic produce. We don't use any kind of chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and even in our process, post-harvest, packaging, there's a lot of criteria in how we do things to keep it clean and not make use of any of those. Because we have organic certification. We actually helped the association to create a cannabis organic certification. They were already regulating the products industry. So the Fraser Valley Organic Producer Association, FOPA. And now there's a few, I think 3 or 4 other LPs that are also certified through them. We helped creating that certification about 2-3 years ago. But yeah, so the way we grow, not only being organic, but I think the living soil is another huge part of that. So organic living soil, it's even in Canada a huge term for cannabis connoisseurs looking for what's growing in LSO. So by being organic, being natural, we, for example, don't have to flush. That is something that a lot of people don't understand at first, because when you talk about flushing, everyone that grows know the importance of flushing in the end of your crop to take out any of your chemicals, the fertilizers that were there. So in our case, we don't have to do that because it's clean all the way. I don't know if there's a scientific base to show difference in flavor, for example, but like I can tell if it's organic nowadays. Like usually when someone gives me something to try, I give a puff and not good.
I mean, that's testament to the growth that the industry needs. We still don't really know the science behind flushing, and experts, quote unquote experts, because it's still hard to be an expert in this field, will tell you the exact opposite things. I've heard that flushing is essential, and I've heard that flushing is a myth, and you just got to do what works for you, because as you've said, you do develop a taste and flavor profile, and you start to be able to tell what companies are cutting corners and what's not, just from your palate.
100%. And it's incredible. Like even looking back to my days at college in Brazil, like what I used to smoke back then, and then now what I refuse, what's not good anymore. It's so much better than what I had. So it's good to see that evolution, and I think that's also one of the best parts of legalization and the international acceptance of cannabis and the growing industry, that we only have better quality moving forward. We will start understanding, like having scientific researches and consumer trial and error, and you see what works and what doesn't.
I'm not sure if you've spent much time back home since developing this passion, but I know that since moving back home, I've become that asshole that my friends are sick of because I'm judging the weed that we're consuming. This isn't good enough. The flavor profile on this isn't good. Oh, the ash is off color. There's no oil ring. And these are things that these people have never heard before and never cared about. They're like, dude, I just want to get high. And I'm here talking about this stuff. But once you enter this space, it's hard not to. It's hard not to get that passion. And that's something I noticed about you. The moment I met you, you have this passion for cannabis. You find that it's the most important aspect of what we do in this space, and I think it's what separates the men from the boys, to use, an old colloquialism. Anyone could work in this space. And we noticed in the early days, it was a lot of alcohol people, a lot of people that had come from different industries to just come and sell. And very quickly you realized that's not what does it. Your experience in sales is one thing, but it's your passion and enthusiasm for this plant. And it's clear that you've aligned yourself with a producer and a brand that practices what they preach and literally wrote the book on organic cannabis. They set the parameters. They helped Health Canada establish those parameters, and it's for the better. So what a wonderful company. What a wonderful array of products. And it's a company I just miss dearly. I've still got my little Blue Dream jar here in Australia with me. I've still got a couple of the posters and things. So I keep you guys close to my heart. I miss it a lot.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be at Rubicon. It's a great company, great people, and with doing the right things. I think that's what it's the most important thing, like doing for the right reasons. Like we are a public traded company. People joke it's a company that sells stocks and sells weed as a base for the stocks. But no, we are a cannabis company, and there's a lot of very, very passionate people actually doing the work and bringing the products to market, and that tells. So it's really good.
So I want to talk to you and get into some detail about Brazil and where things stand there. But before we do that, I just want to change pace a little bit, and I'm wondering if you're interested in playing our quiz, Hotbox. How does that sound?
Yeah, it's good.
So Hotbox will operate with a 60-second timer. I'm going to ask you would you rather questions. Do your best to give short, sharp answers, but explain in depth if you need to. All right, let's do this. Best thing about the cannabis industry?
The future, all the possibilities that you have in the future of the industry.
Worst thing about the cannabis industry?
The regulators. Not even the regulations, but who makes the regulations not having cannabis understanding to do that.
Indica, sativa, or hybrid?
Sativa.
Flower or edibles?
flower.
Joints or blunts?
Joints.
Favorite place to consume?
Beach, overlooking the ocean. It's always good.
Favorite cannabis product right now?
Right now, our White Rainbow, 28 grams. It's in the ounce bag.
Blue Dream or sour cookies?
Tough one. I'll go with sour cookies.
White Runts or gelato cake?
White Runs.
Best munchies snack?
Brigadeiro. It's a Brazilian dessert, chocolate dessert. Very nice.
Is BC Bud the best in the world?
I haven't tried from everywhere, but from everywhere I've tried, BC Bud is the best by far.
And lucky last, describe your perfect 420.
Perfect 420. Spending the day with friends, smoking organic, good, high quality cannabis, rosin, dabbing some rosin along the day, having a really, really chill day and enjoying the 420 vibes.
It's so funny with that 420 question because no one's ever like, oh, I want 80 pounds of weed and I want a private jet and a private party. It's always just, hey, I just want to be somewhere nice with my friends.
100%. Yeah, that's much more important than anything else.
So let's talk about Brazil as we head towards the tail end of this show. Brazil is not a country I have traveled to. It's not a country I know a lot about. So talk to us about what the current status of cannabis in Brazil is. What's the legalization or lack of, and what is the kind of cultural standing?
So Brazil is a huge country. There's a lot of difference in culture overall, from north to south, northeast to southeast. It's kind of several different countries inside of one. But I think overall, what's happening is that it's getting better every year. So stigma is decreasing. You can see medical cannabis being spoken about in national television. That's something when I was growing up, I never saw that. So it's good to see this becoming a more normal conversation, still in the medical side. But that's how people understand what cannabis actually is. Even making a parallel, a good friend of mine in Brazil, I remember talking about cannabis. He runs a medical association, and we were talking about, medical cannabis, recreational cannabis. I was talking about my plan to come into Canada, and he said, there's no recreational cannabis. Every cannabis is medicinal, and that's how I feel, and obviously used in parties and whatever reason you want to, but it touches you in a way that it is medicinal. You know it or not. Growing up, there was a lot of stigma. When I started consuming more in my maybe mid-20s, I knew there was a lot of stigma from people, so it wasn't something that I was very open about. My close friends knew about it. My family didn't know about it until the day I brought up to my mom, to my dad. Nowadays, they smoke with me when we get together.
Yes.
But yeah, I think legalization is going to happen. It's a matter of when and not if. Medical cannabis is getting more access every year. Like I mentioned, this medical association before. The name is Santa Cannabis, from the state I was born in, Santa Catarina. They are actually growing their own cannabis now. They weren't allowed to until last year. Now they have their own facility. They're growing themselves legally to be able to treat their patients, which is amazing. And you have access to more people. In the beginning, I think maybe 8 years ago, I think was when the medical program started, but was very, very strict to who had access to that. Very few specific medical conditions. Now it's getting, broader, and as they understand, as they see also that's no harm to anyone. It's actually the opposite. So I think it's positive. Talking about Brazil right now, it's very hard in political terms. I don't know if you follow at all, but it's like a shit show. I won't even get into that, but it's insane. So I think cannabis is not a priority at the moment, with everything going on in the past maybe 10 years, even with extreme left, extreme right, extreme left again. But cannabis is growing anyway every year. There's a lot of advocates, a lot of associations, and a lot of people that need cannabis. So it's going to happen.
It's funny because I was reading this week that President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine is imploring Parliament to legalize cannabis. And it's just of all people to have too many things on their plate, he's still got time for this. And I think it's a nice little lesson in kind of a reality check. Like, you can do more than one thing in government. You don't just have to focus on one thing and have to put everything to the side. And that's what I notice here in Australia. There's a lot of this rhetoric about like, oh, bigger fish to fry. We don't quite have time for this. Now, that probably could be a legitimate excuse in Brazil right now. But if Zelensky, who is mid-war with Russia, is still seeing the importance of this for the Ukrainian people for medicinal reasons, he's talking about post-war PTSD and things like that. Like, there's real information out there about this stuff. So it's a kind of sobering reality. It's like, all right, if he's got time for it, maybe the rest of the world leaders have time for it as well. But it's definitely interesting. And I think you raised a good point. Brazil is over 200 million people, and it's hard to legislate for that many people. Different states often take on the responsibility. We're about a tenth of the size of Brazil, and we still have such differences from state to state. But, generally speaking, cannabis has been illegal in Brazil since 1830. Possession for personal use was depenalized in 2006, meaning the first response to a charge is supposed to be a warning, community service, and education. Now, knowing that someone in Brazil can also get 5 to 15 years for trafficking cannabis, what has been your experience of that? You might not be able to speak to the whole country, but how have you seen the police respond to people using cannabis in light of the fact it's supposed to be depenalized?
That's a good point too, and I think it's very similar to North America. It's very racial based. There's a lot of racism involved too. Like, I heard of stories of people with a joint in their pockets going to prison, and people with a couple bags not having any penalty. Like, depending on who you are and all of that. Brazil it's very much so. It's still with that mentality. So it's not easy, but that definitely going in a better direction the next years.
What have you learned, and what would be your vision for a framework for legalization in Brazil, or even specifically your home state? If you want to go a little bit smaller than that, what do you want that to look like, in 10 years' time?
Brazil will be a huge market someday, both for growing and for consumption. A lot of people do smoke in Brazil. I think there's a lot of lessons learned from Canada and from other countries that I hope Brazil sees that and use that to create their framework. We usually have national regulations, not broken by state. So it's easier in that sense. I think when it happens, it will be easier. We won't have as many roadblocks or as many restrictions as we have in Canada. So that's a good side. I hope it's more open to who was already doing that in the past. That's something that I think a lot of people complain with, saying the truth, that many people that fought for legalization, that were growing cannabis for decades, they can't be in the legal industry yet for whatever reason. So it's not legalized for them yet. And I feel that these should be the first people that should have access to this. If you're saying that now, okay, we changed our minds, it's legal now, we actually realize it's not as harmful as we thought it was. So whoever, is already doing that should have first leaps, let's say, of coming to the legal market. So that's what I hope we see in Brazil, like, especially with these associations. I see a lot of them bringing people over that are kind of in this area, like that association I mentioned before. I know a few people there. I have a good friend that grows cannabis for many years. He's growing for them now. So whenever it comes legal, like, he's already in this path, right? Like, so I hope that we keep giving power to the associations. That's what's happening right now. And then they can help creating regulations that make sense and that okay, actually bring good products to people, and not just creating a lot of extra paperwork, extra packaging, waste that wasn't needed. So yeah, those are my hopes.
And they're very reasonable ones, and they come based in reality. We go to Canada, we experience what's on offer there, we see what's great about it, we see what lessons are to be learned, and then we hope we can bring these things back to our home countries and hopefully see a framework that is not just based on Canada's, but has learnt lessons from that. So that's all you hope the governments are doing, looking around the world, seeing what works, what doesn't, not being scared to try things, and then going for it. So, I'm hopeful for your sake and your family's sake that positive things happen in Brazil and we see changes, because everywhere we see these changes and we see this destigmatization, it helps other countries. You know, Australia wouldn't be where it's at without Canada, without, you know, even Thailand. Thailand is a huge holiday destination for Australians. So for Australians to now go there and just see this on the street, it normalizes it. And they come home, and instead of talking negatively about someone smoking cannabis, they might have actually tried it for themselves. So very exciting things to come, you know, very much hopeful for both our home countries that we can catch up with Canada and maybe even overtake one day.
Absolutely. I actually have a funny story in Thailand. I went to Thailand in the end of 2018, and I was like looking for how I could have access to cannabis in my South Eastern Asia trip. And I saw that it was very difficult and very illegal as well, like risky. So I planned, you know, not to have any cannabis, not even look for it. And, you know, okay, I'll spend those days and that's fine. Prepare my mentality for that. And then we were in Thailand. We went to this beach, Railay Beach, and it's a very like relaxing place. Instead of Koh Phi Phi, we decided that one instead of Koh Phi Phi to be just relaxing at the beach. And then like a very small town, walking into like dirt roads, like very, very small city. And then I saw this bar with like some Bob Marley.
The international sign of weed.
Yeah. Okay, let's check it out. And it was like live music, a lot of people dancing. Okay, seems like a good time. Went inside, ordered a drink, and then in front of us, a guy just got a joint, lighted up, and started smoking. I said, "Okay, we are in the good, in the right place." And then I went to the bartender and asked him like, "Okay, what it is? Like, if I can find it." "Oh yeah, I have it. How many do you want?"
Yes.
And then okay, I'll have 2 joints. Okay, great. And then he put on my tab.
Running it through the books and everything.
Anyway, yeah, totally unexpected. But anyway, it was a great experience. The rest of Thailand wasn't like that at all. Like later on, I learned that is a region that it's known for that, like inside of the Asia culture. So I was very fortunate to get that by accident.
It's such a great way of connecting with other people, and it's why we take those risks. It's why we've taken the risks in our youth, in our home countries. It's why we advocate for people to kind of put themselves on a limb and go out there a little bit, because even though it was highly illegal in Thailand at that stage, it enhanced your trip. It connected you with people. It gave you a story to tell 5 years later. And I'm just glad that, I'm going on my honeymoon in Thailand in about 2 months' time. And thankfully that the situation is a little bit different there at the moment, and it's going to be a lot easier to get. But I'm very much looking forward to connecting with the Thai people on that level.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to hearing from our experiences there.
Oh, yeah. I'll document it as best as I can. I've already explained to Ruth, my partner, I'm like, I'm sorry. I know it's our honeymoon, but it's also a bit of a business trip.
Absolutely.
Well, Antonio, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm so grateful for your time and your passion and your expertise. The final segment for the show is called Polls of Wisdom. And this is where you offer one key takeaway for the listener, whether it's from our conversation, something to think about, a fun fact. Go for it.
I would say, follow your passion. The future of cannabis is bright. It's only growing everywhere in the world, and I don't see it slowing down in the next 10, 20, 30 years. There's so much to happen. We look at other industries like wine, beer, the craft beer in the last 30 years. It's hard to think of an industry that you only see growth. Most industries are in decline or at least stagnant, and cannabis is only growing. So for whoever has this passion and don't know how to break into the industry, just do it. It's as we mentioned a few times here in the conversation, that's the biggest differentiator for anyone in the industry. The people that I know, peers and people from the retail world, from other companies, the ones I see succeeding or getting on the right path are the ones with hard passion, because it's not just a job for who is like that. For me, it's not just a job.
Couldn't agree more. What an outstanding sentiment. It is a bit of a gold rush experience. It's a bit like the mid 1800s in California and Australia, where people are just flooding to one spot to try and earn their fortune. But the difference is passion does matter in cannabis. Consuming cannabis does matter, working in cannabis. So that's an excellent poll of wisdom there. Antonio, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
I have my Instagram account. It's just antonio.rubicon. Love talking about weed, as I think it's clear. So I'm always happy to help and talk about anything cannabis. Yeah.
Antonio, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, see you again. You're a good friend. I miss smoking buzz with you in Canada, but I'm glad that someone's holding down the fort for both of us. Antonio Tiergarten, thank you so much for joining us today.
100%. Can't wait for us to get together again and smoke a few joints. Thanks for the invite. It was a pleasure.
Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations is written and produced by me, Paul. Music written and produced by Big Mike. Follow us on Instagram at Give and Toke or get in touch by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com. You'll also find us on both Twitter and Facebook. All opinions expressed by program guests are solely their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the position of Give and Toke. Content discussed in this show does not constitute medical advice. Cannabis is not legal everywhere, so please be aware of local laws.